Time to round up a big topic from the week. The war on drugs is once again up for debate. And now the Houston Police Chief, Charles McClelland, is calling it a, quote, miserable failure. The chief made those comments during an interview on the radio show Cultural Baggage, which aired on FM 90.1 this past Friday. He says the money spent jailing low-level drug offenders would be better spent on treatment and prevention programs. Take a listen.
It costs somewhere around $50,000 to $60,000 per inmate to house one single inmate per year in Texas prisons. When you look at it just from a financial, monetary standpoint, the taxpayers can't afford to build jails and prisons to lock up everyone that commit a crime. We must put more money into crime prevention, treatment, education, job training.
So what do you think of a police chief moving away from the traditional stance on drugs? That's our topic this half hour. We want to hear from you on our Fox 26 Facebook page. You can also weigh in on Twitter. Be sure to use the hashtag Fox26forlife. Joining us live in the newsroom is our Roundup panel led by our Fox 26 legal analyst, Chris Tritico. Hey, Chris, good morning again. Good morning. Was this surprising to you to hear these kinds of comments coming from a major city police chief?
Well, I think he's the first chief of police that I've heard in the country that came out and said this. It's not surprising because we have been moving this direction for the last couple of years now. I think it's very gutsy of Chief McClelland to acknowledge that our focus the last 30 years on low-level drug offenders as opposed to those people who are creating the problem is an abysmal failure. And we have created an entire class of individuals who are convicted of misdemeanors and felonies, preventing them from getting jobs, preventing them from getting higher education degrees, and creating a subculture of people who can't advance. And that's what Chief McClelland is talking about. Aside from the tax money that we spend housing low-level drug offenders, this subculture of people that we are forcing to work low-level jobs the rest of their lives is something we will be paying for a very long time. Let me introduce our panel. Mustafa Tamiz, our political analyst, Jackie BALY, our public policy analyst. One day I'll get you two squared away. You look so alike to me. I don't know. Mustafa, we've seen the war on drugs. About 30 years ago, we started this war on drugs, maybe 40 years now. And instead of going after the people selling the drugs, the people bringing the drugs in, we started arresting the people using the drugs. And we've got this whole class of people now that are convicted. And Chief McClelland says this isn't working.
Well, if you look at the numbers, it's staggering. Every 50 minutes in Harris County, we arrest somebody for possession. That's almost 11,000 cases. Texas, just in enforcement, spends $250 million. So the math of this is what's driving it. And Chief McClelland is not the first to the party. The president has talked about this. Governor Perry's talked about this. Both the DA's candidate and an incumbent DA has talked about this. And what they're saying is not legalizing marijuana, but decriminalizing it so that for possession purposes that we can find a way of not putting this on people's records so that they can't get a job. Because most of these offenses happen very early in life. And once, as you said, once you tag somebody with that, once they have a criminal record, they can't get a job. And it's not working. It hasn't deterred people from using marijuana, and we have to find a better way. So regardless of why we went down this path, the question should be where we're headed. And I think with the chief stepping up into this is a great opportunity because you've got both Republicans and Democrats lined up to begin to decriminalize marijuana.
Is treatment and interdiction a proper law enforcement function?
What he's saying is we need to have more efficiency, at least from the statements we're seeing. We need to have more efficiency and use our taxpayer dollars more wisely. So instead of looking at possession of marijuana as a criminal issue, let's look at it as a health issue, and that will help treat the problem that we're looking at on hand. We spend $51 billion on whatever this war on drugs is, and the chief and others are saying, and it is a nonpartisan issue, both sides of the aisle. Many are saying, look, let's use this $51 billion more wisely, because arresting these people for marijuana is not solving the problem. 74%, Gallup poll says, 74% of Americans agree with the statements the chief is making and others are making.
All right, let's go to Sally. She's monitoring our social media.
And on social media, they appear to agree as well with the chief. One thing I want to bring up as far as what happens next in this whole situation now is what one of the chief's comments was on the radio show, and that's he says the federal government really needs to take the lead on this, because you can't have a state law, a federal law. It makes it much easier if the federal government takes the lead. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. But the interesting thing is that it just flies in the face of the people that were just elected, because they're saying let the states handle these issues. You've got this problem created right now that Colorado and Washington D.C. have legalized marijuana, and the federal government said we will not enforce our federal marijuana laws in these states, which has created an equal protection problem that's now being litigated in California. And so we're going to see where that goes. But I think he's right. The federal government should take the lead on this. Everyone seems to agree we need to do something. No one has necessarily the political will, Mustafa, to say marijuana is okay, except the president, who doesn't have to run again.
Well, the president, Governor Perry, I mean, he is running for president, and he's talked about this. So I think the political is starting to build.
But Governor Perry talked about decriminalizing.
Well,
the president said something pretty harsh. I mean, there's no big deal.
Well, look, I think, well, we can debate that. But for the most part, I think for the larger conversation, when you talk about legalizing marijuana, it creates a federal problem, because then the federal government can't prosecute. But if you talk about decriminalizing, which is where bulk of the conversation is in law enforcement and the DA, then that can be done at a state level. It can be done at individual jurisdiction. We're starting to see the path to that happening, and we as citizens need to encourage it, if not for any reasons. Our local budgets for local law enforcement has just been staggering. We've got to do something about it.
So if the federal government gets involved, I think maybe they could allocate some money like we were talking about in the earlier segment. But I think this is a states' right issue, because every state has a different point of view. Every state has different issues. We've seen some of our leaders, they've already stepped up. They've said decriminalizing marijuana is something that we will be looking at, something that we will be going forward to in Texas. So I do think some of our Texas leaders are looking at this, and I think each state has to look at their own problems and come up with the policies and laws that affect their constituents the best.
All right, we'll see where it goes from there. The important thing to know, Sally, is even if Texas does legalize this eventually, states like Colorado who already have, doesn't mean your employer has to agree. And if you go out and smoke marijuana on a legal place, that doesn't mean you're not going to get fired.
All right. Thanks, guys.